Welcome, everyone, to a very special episode of Legends and Lectures. I'm here with the wonderful, the lovely Dr. Elaine Bander, and we're here to talk about Jane Austen and her new book, Reading with Jane Austen. Elaine, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's a very great pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
So if you could just hold up the book one more time, so people, we did it quickly off camera. Wonderful, thank you so much. For those, it is, as I said before, it is sold out in many places, but there will be more of them soon, and we will put the link below. So, Elaine, if you could tell us a little bit about the book and why Jane.
Okay. Well, I'll start with why Jane, and then the book, because obviously Jane precedes the book. I had always resisted reading Jane Austen, and I'm so impressed when I come across people who say, "Oh, I read Pride and Prejudice when I was 12 and I loved it." I tried it when I was 12 and I didn't love it. The first chapter just, I was used to the Brontes, Wuthering Heights. So that very choppy to me conversation between um, the Bennets, Mr. Bennett and Mrs. Bennett, about visiting Netherfield. I thought, who cares? I didn't finish reading. Yeah, and it was only, and I did read the classic comic, however, and it was only when I was in my third year novel course as an undergraduate at McGill that my wonderful professor lectured on Emma, and I read the book and said, "Oh, this is what it's all about," and then went on to read all of her novels and went off after my BA to do the summer of traveling and came back and said, "I want to sit in a library and I want to read more Jane Austen." And that's what I started to do. And then eventually I did my PhD on Jane Austen and, of course, read everything that I could get my hands on. Um, and by the time I completed my PhD, there weren't likely going to be any university jobs. I was teaching at Dawson College in Montreal, very happily there and settled with a family life here. And there's no way I was going to go off seeking a job. So I was working as a non-research teacher in a college, not in a university. Nobody paid me to research. I didn't have a lot of spare time, especially with a young child. And I kind of, forgot about Jane Austen after a while, except for my own pleasure. And I came back to her a bit later, having been introduced to the Jane Austen Society. And thereafter, I attended the annual general meetings, the conferences of the Jane Austen Society every year, and I responded to the call for papers. I'd write my little talk, actually big talk, because in those days they allowed you a whole hour, which is
Wow.
wonderful, with people who've actually read the books. And if you're a teacher, having a room full of people who've actually read the books, that is just amazing. So it's the most wonderful experience. And every year I would respond to, the call for paper prompt with an essay. And the society has its own journal. So I published elsewhere, but most of my publications have been in Persuasions, the Journal of the Jane Austen Society of North America. So I have quite a body of work. And over the years, I've done, I think, 3 chapters in books, but I've never done a book of my own. And um, I still felt that there was a lot to say and a lot that had to be said and that should be said. So a few years ago, I sat down to see if my accumulated work would make anything like a coherent book. And that was a process that went through a number of revisions because, of course, you can't just throw essays written over a 30-year period together and say, "Hey, here's a book." In the end, everything was rethought, revised, new chapters written, old chapters changed or merged. And what I did was to address what I thought was the current state of affairs, where Jane Austen is more popular than she's ever been in her lifetime or past her lifetime. She's part of our popular culture now, but I think there's less and less attention being paid to the words she wrote and to the words she read. And since as a writer, Jane Austen was always responding against the grain to the books that she read, I rewrote everything I had already read, rethought everything I had ever thought, and constructed my book around the argument that Jane Austen, very widely read, and with the kind of brain that would have put her in an English department at a university today, but not possible in her day, brought a great critical sensibility to her reading. So she could identify all the characteristics of the different kinds of novels and other genres that she read. And when she wrote, she was always playing against readers' expectations that she would do what everyone else was doing. And if you're reading casually, it may look like she is. I mean, how many times do you hear people refer to Jane Austen as a romance writer? Uh-uh, no, anti-romance, playing against your expectations that this is going to be another romantic novel. So that's what I did. And I had a lot of fun doing it because I got to say everything that I've said before. And I thought people just aren't listening to me. I think I've made a very cogent argument with plenty of evidence. So why are they still talking about Jane Austen as a romance writer or still assuming that Elizabeth Bennet is in love with Darcy at first sight but doesn't know it because
Oh
it's not
no.
Chris and Benedict relationship at all. It well, even with Beatrice and Benedict, they're not in love with her anyway. Yeah, I had a great deal of pleasure constructing it and hoped that I tried to write it. It's an academic book, so it's got footnotes. And the first chapter has to address what everyone else has said and where I fit into that conversation, because that's what an academic book has to do. But I really wrote it for people who like to read Jane Austen and hoped that they would like to read my book.
It's always the classic of if you think Jane Austen's works are about romance, you need to read them again. And as well, it's very clear, I think, in Pride and Prejudice that Lizzie is not in love with Mr. Darcy until she sees how big his house is. It's
Yeah.
Jane is quite clear on that.
Oh, I'm not even sure that's it. I think that's her little joke. But because in the early chapters, you know, she's really got a big crush on Wickham. You
Hmm.
know, everywhere she goes in public, she's looking for Wickham, and Darcy's in the way. Get out of the way. You're not the one I want to see. It's him I want to see. And yeah. And then later, she really likes Darcy's cousin, but he makes it clear he can't afford to marry a girl without a dowry like Elizabeth. And I, Austen goes out of her way to show the very slow progress of Elizabeth coming to love Darcy. First, it's respect and esteem, and these are code words. Everyone in the 18th century used them in talking about relationships and the stages of relationships. You'll find them in the conduct literature. You'll find them in novels. You have to respect and esteem. So after Darcy's letter and her long reflection on it and her slow and difficult changing of her mind, because we all know how hard that is when we have an entrenched position. Oh my God, we've got to change it. Um, so she comes to esteem him. This is a good man. He's a good man. He's a just man. And then she's absolutely amazed when Darcy's housekeeper describes him as a kind and
Hmm.
charitable man. That she just yes, good yes, but kind and charitable. I don't know. That doesn't fit the. So that goes into the revision. And then she actually experiences his wonderful manners to her and her family,
Hmm.
um, and everything is changing. But she spends 2 hours at night awake in bed, wondering, but is he someone I could be happy living with? Because he could be a good man and a charitable man and a just man and a kind man and still be someone who she wouldn't want for a life companion. She's not yet sure, but it's only when he comes back, after saving her sister, and he comes back um, uh, and with Bingley, and she's expecting, will he, won't he? That she realizes that she does love him. And Austen described, I'm sorry, I'm going on at great length there, describes that scene when they come in to the gathering and she's serving the tea and coffee and her body reacts physically to his presence. I think I forgot the exact details. I think she flushes and she's absolutely physically focused on his presence, and we know this is a woman now, a woman in love, and this is the man she wants to spend her life with. But that didn't happen
I would
instant.
even argue that it goes so far as to say she really didn't love him, but she, as you say, she respected and esteemed him because he saved her sister.
Oh,
She
gratitude. That's the
Yes,
other keyword,
gratitude is that
gratitude.
she felt that she sort of owed him a bit. And I would even argue that she didn't even really think it was a possibility until Lady Catherine de Bourgh shows up
Yes,
and says,
yes,
"How dare you think about marrying my
yes,
nephew?" And
yes.
then I think it's then where she's like, "You know what? I'm gonna
Yeah,
marry your
yeah,
nephew.
yeah.
What are you gonna do
Clarifies
about
her
it?"
mind for
Yeah.
her. Right. And that gratitude first for his choosing her and then for his saving her sister, which he says, of course, I did it all for you. This is my gift to you.
It's very funny that I had not necessarily a similar experience, but something akin. I uh, I also did not like Pride and Prejudice when I read it because I didn't read it when I was younger. I read it last, and I read Northanger Abbey or Northanger Abbey when I was I think when I was 14, 15. I liked it. But I didn't really get I didn't, I thought, oh, Catherine's very silly. I didn't really get the whole
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
message at the time. And of course, we all like Tilney. He's a great guy. But I didn't understand, how she was playing with the Gothic themes there. I just thought it was a very fun novel.
Yeah,
But the one, and then I read Persuasion, and around, I think maybe it was 20 years ago, and that was the one that hooked me, was
yeah,
Persuasion. And it's the language of the prose. And then I read and then I read Sense and Sensibility, which I liked.
yeah,
But I find that Sense and Sensibility and Pride and Prejudice fall into the same category of, again, that sort of pastiche of romance, where they're great novels. And obviously, I did come to love Pride and Prejudice eventually, but it's still my least favorite because
uh,
I read Emma and I went, "This is the greatest
yeah,
novel of all time."
yes.
And when you read Emma, really as an adult, you read it and you think this is the best because it's an unlikable protagonist who gets knocked down a peg, and everyone else around her is great and such interesting characterization. And yet
Yeah.
Emma has qualities that are even though she's a bitch, she's still
Still
has
a heroine.
yeah, she's still a heroine. She's nice to her father. She takes care of her father, which is a big deal.
Hmm.
She still does charity throughout the village. She has time for everybody, even though she makes fun of them. She still she still understands and recognizes her place in society as a charitable object, but she's going to
And
complain about it the whole time.
yeah, and there's seen we see her doing two things. We see her um in an awkward social situation, first restraining herself. That whole long chapter of her first in a social visit with Mrs. Elton, we're all we're all feeling the same outrage and indignation that Emma must be feeling because I think Mrs. Elton is really her evil twin. And
Without money. Or rather, I should say no, Augusta Hawkins does have money. She's without good
yeah,
breeding.
yeah, yeah. And Emma just sits there. Oh yes. Indeed. Um, and she restrains herself throughout instead of saying, but
Insufferable woman, don't you?
and then at that Christmas party when her sister and brother-in-law are visiting and the kids
Hmm.
and her brother-in-law, unlike dear Mr. Knightley, whom we love, is a bit irritable and a little curmudgeonly.
Well, her
And
sister's a bit of a crack too. I think
yeah, yeah,
they're, yeah.
yeah. And she can see this argument building up between her father and her brother-in-law. So she's monitoring the conversation all the time, kind of like a good teacher has to do in the classroom, and heading off the discussion from the danger points where it might erupt into rudeness and hurt feelings, and she can't have that. So, awful though she is, Austen then lets us see her at her very best. She's got all those bad feelings. So does Fanny Price, who people call a little prig. Fanny's got all those bad feelings, but they both know, well, except on one notable occasion, Emma knows how to restrain them, control them.
But that's why Mr. Knightley says that he quietly has fallen in love with her. And it was really the picnic scene where he says badly done, Emma, where he decides,
Yeah,
no, I don't like her. And then he says that he had to go away to have a discussion with himself. But then he went to a wrong place. As she says, he went to see George and Emma's sister. He went to see George and Isabella and realized, maybe I do like her after all, even though she said something that was really terrible to her neighbors. So Emma is my favorite, and my second favorite, since you mentioned the little prig, is actually Mansfield Park. And people don't like Mansfield Park because it's not funny. I would argue that some conversations are quite funny.
some are very funny, yes.
But people don't like Fanny. They think she's a dip. They think she's boring, and it is her most moralistic one. But she
Yeah,
does make a
yeah,
lot of comments about things like slavery and religion, and I think people don't like it because it is more serious. I also
yeah.
don't think Fanny should have ended up with Edmund. I think Edmund should have been left to flounder by himself because he's so.
But see, I think they're a very good pair. I don't think I if we were planning a dinner party, we'd much rather have the Crawfords. But I think Edmund and Fanny make an excellent pair.
I don't
I
think Edmund deserves her. That's the point. And of course, I understand that Miss Crawford is supposed to be the
yeah,
temptress who gets between them. But
yeah,
Mary isn't really, when it comes to Fanny, as we've said before, Mary is really not a bad person. She doesn't really care very much for moralistic things, and she does make fun of people in the Navy, like Fanny's brother. But she's nice to Fanny. She
yeah,
just like Emma, she's a bitch, but she has those qualities that make the heroes fall in love with them.
yeah.
And
Well, yeah, I would even say she's not a bitch like Emma. She and Austen says she is the really good feelings by which she was usually governed. So her behavior usually follows very warm, generous, kind impulses. That's Mary. But what she doesn't have, and what Fanny does have, Fanny is not as inherently nice and warm. Well, she's got tender feelings too, but she has a stronger critical sense. Mary doesn't have moral principles. She has principles,
hmm
but they're social principles. Elder sons are preferable to younger sons. Marriage is a taking in. She's got a few other principles like that. But she doesn't have that firm moral framework that Fanny and Edmund operate from. And Fanny is the only character in the novel who will reflect. She retreats to her room, the White Attic,
hmm
and thinks about her behavior. Did she do the right thing? Was it selfish not to want to act because she personally doesn't want to act? Should she do what would help everyone else to whom she feels a sense of duty as well as affection? Was she correct? And she does it first about the acting, and she does it again with Henry Crawford's proposal. And she is the only one. And Austen is so explicit about this. When Mariah is faced with her father asks her, "Look, do you really want to marry this drip or not? Because yes, it's a marriage that makes me happy in a worldly way, but can he make you happy as a man? And you might, go astray if he doesn't, which is exactly what happens." And we learn, Austen tells us that she deliberately shut down her critical mind. She's an intelligent woman. She's well educated. She's been taught the principles, but she does not want to think about her marriage. Just, she's hot for Henry, who is an incorrigible flirt, serial seducer. And she doesn't want to think or reflect about her own behavior or her choices. And her sister, too. I mean, they all have refused to think, to reflect. And that's what Fanny spends so much time. She's got this constant moral disputation going on in her head. Um, and sometimes we share it. So she's got no sense of humor whatsoever. She really wouldn't be great fun at a dinner party. Um,
No, she doesn't like speaking.
but she can. That the scene in where all the young people are gathered, and most of them are around the piano, and Edmund and Fanny are stargazing. They're looking at the
Oh,
stars and
yes, they look the
yeah.
Arcturus.
And
Yes.
she goes on and she apologizes for her rhapsody. And again, the time she gets rained on and has to take refuge with Mary, and she goes into or maybe it's another visit. She goes into a rhapsody about trees.
Hmm.
Uh, get her started on something like that, and she's got plenty to say. But
Yeah,
and
when it comes to things that are going on,
yeah,
she
yeah.
doesn't really
And
talk.
she has the aesthetic capacity to appreciate Henry's excellent acting skills,
That's true.
even when it's very painful and she's there, he's visiting her as an acknowledged suitor, and he's reading Shakespeare, Henry VIII, which has strong parallels, by the way, to their situation. And she is resolutely doing her needlework, but he charms the needle from her fingers. She stops because she can't help but listen. And Henry, I think it might even be in the same scene where Austen says he had the moral taste to appreciate her. He doesn't have the moral principles. He can't give a name to the qualities that he admires in her because he doesn't know those moral terms, but he knows that he could rely upon her integrity if she were his wife. He would never have to worry about her, never mistrust her. He has the moral taste. So my tagline used to be about Henry that he'd rather marry virtue than acquire it.
Hmm.
Uh, he admires Fanny in lots of, and of course he romanticizes her. He thinks she has touches of the angel. She's no angel. She just knows how to behave. She has discipline, moral discipline.
But Henry likes an excitement, he
Yeah,
doesn't want a boring wife.
yeah,
And it's kind of a shame that
yeah.
Henry and Mary are brother and sister, because if they weren't,
Make a great pair. Yeah,
exactly. So, that's the point. And that's the point, is that they are sort of two sides of the same coin. They're not
yeah,
exactly alike. As in, Mary understands how to, I mean, she's charmed Edmund correctly.
yeah,
And she does like him, but as she says, she will not marry a younger
yeah.
son without
And
money.
The Crawfords have far more wonderful qualities than Fanny and Edmund, but they lack the essential. And
Hmm.
Austen's doing that deliberately. It's a real challenge for us reading. Um, yeah,
I think people treat Fanny unfairly. I think people treat Mansfield Park unfairly. It is the biggest novel. But
yeah,
I think it is certainly, when it comes to the writing, I think it is, Emma is my favorite, but I think the language in Mansfield Park is the best,
yeah,
especially the section where Fanny goes back to Portsmouth. I think
yeah,
that's the best piece of writing she's ever done,
yeah,
because we see Fanny back in her own home, but the language that Austen uses to describe it as a place of misery, as her father being dirty and gross. It's very, very interesting
Yeah,
how she is very descriptive when it comes to what would otherwise be a very boring place, right? Portsmouth is just a ports town at that point. And whereas Fanny thinks that being, a sailor is a noble, Eminence says it's a noble profession. We see Fanny's dad, who was a shipman and who had 9 children without really thinking about it, how her mother is just completely scatterbrained and only cares about one child. And we just see Fanny's place in it all and how
mhm,
Susan is neglected and all this. And it's very interesting to see that even Austen had, even though she could have painted Fanny's original family in a better light, she chose not to, and
mm,
she makes them really awful because you
yeah,
see the quote unquote awfulness kind of what Fanny grew up in at her cousin's house, and then you see the real squalor of what she could have grown up in.
yeah.
And
And sorry.
no, she had that moment where she could have just said, yes, they're poor, but they're kind and they love their daughter, and she just went, no.
But she has that close relationship with her brother, William. And I think we're meant to see because the novel opens with the three sisters and three
Hmm.
different marriages. And Mrs. Norris would have been a fantastic Mrs. Price. She would have managed that big family, that household, much better than Mrs. Price does. And Mrs. Price would have been a perfectly fine Lady Bertram. She could have sat on the sofa in nice
Hmm.
clothes without any problem at all. So it's so interesting that she set it up that way. But it's also the only novel where Austen comes close to or does actually um, invoke symbolism or even allegory, like the role of the wilderness.
Hmm.
Yeah. And it
As
happens
as
several times in that novel.
and the cross, that one is very,
Cross.
yeah, the chain
Yes,
and the cross.
the chain and the cross, right? And the cross not able to go on the chain. Um, and the needle falling from her hands. I'm not sure if that's not symbolism anyway. Yeah, but
Or
it's
as well, was it the roses? Fanny's been cutting roses, has she? And so they make her go back and forth twice until
yeah,
she
yeah,
gets a migraine.
yeah.
And so there's a lot of symbolism in Mansfield Park. And as you say, I think upon a first reading, people might miss a lot of things because they go, "Oh, this is not really a romance. It's kind of boring." But I think that kind of feeds into Persuasion as well, where Jane is not only making commentary on marriages and how people need money to marry and that kind of thing. But at the end, she says, people think that coats are so great, but is does the Navy have more charm rather than national importance? I don't know. And so she does make some commentary there about the military. I mean, if she hasn't made it in Pride and Prejudice by then, I think in Persuasion it's actually quite clear. There are some things that people don't know that she's written. And what about her juvenilia? What about things like Lady Susan?
Oh, well, it's all very fun. Lady Susan is maybe the least typical of the juvenilia. It owes a lot more to something like Duclos' Les Liaisons Dangereuses. And it as a novel written in letters in the voice of Lady Susan as the total cynical, fashionable woman. It's it's a great deal of fun to read. And I think it's perfect little work of its kind, but it's not typical of the other things she was writing. They were more well, we call them burlesques today, the parodies that she was taking the elements of various kinds of genre of fiction and drama and history and so on, and just spoofing them by exaggerating their characteristics. And so just as Northanger Abbey makes a lot more sense if you know something about the kind of novel, for example, that Frances Burney was writing
Hmm.
and Maria Worth and so on. about a young lady's introduction to society, which is book one, and if you know about Anne Radcliffe's Gothic novels,
Hmm.
which is parodied in book two, because they're two different styles of parody. And in the juvenilia, the more you know about the cliches of the fiction of her time, and she was, she had a PhD in fictional cliche, the funnier it is because um, she plays with those. I mean, they're very funny. What can I say? They're fun to read. They're very anarchic, um, and she was just having fun and entertaining her family and closest friends because most of them are dedicated to
Hmm.
friends, brothers, or cousins or whatever.
Not Emma. Emma was
No, no. Well,
dedicated.
the later novels, no. And of course, Emma, she was required to dedicate it to the Prince Regent, whom she disliked very
Oh
much.
yes, so she always took
Royal
his wife's
command,
side.
royal command, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it was. I think that's probably the closest thing to an award she ever got in her day because she was allowed to dedicate it to him once she found out that he
Yeah,
was a fan,
yeah,
and it did, thinking that it would sell more, and it did do well. So.
yeah.
So maybe it wasn't such a throwaway after all. I know, kowtowing to people that you hate in order to get things published. How little things have changed. What about Jane's Bath Association or Jane's Bath
Oh,
Association?
have to remember, it's not the bath you take in the bathroom, it's Bath.
It's Bath, yes.
Um, well, her parents were met and were married in Bath, and they're buried. Not her mother, her father
Her
is
father.
buried in Bath. Um,
What?
and
That I didn't know because I know he
yeah,
died in
yeah,
1801. I thought
yeah.
he was buried back at the rectory.
No, no, no. He's buried
Wow.
in you can St. Swithin's still there. Yeah,
That is so
yeah,
kismetical because the
yeah,
last thing that Jane ever wrote was a poem about St. Swithin's Day.
yeah, 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 yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So her family, her immediate birth family began in Bath. Um, and her parents obviously liked the place. It changed a lot in the intervening decades. And if you read Northanger Abbey, written in the late 1790s,
Hmm.
and Persuasion, written in the late 18 teens, you can see the social difference between everything happening in the um, in the public spaces of the pump room
Hmm.
and the octagon room and the assembly room and the theater. Everything's happening in private, elegant private homes. Lady Dalrymple, um, Anne's father and sister, very proud of their lodgings with two drawing rooms and so on. Um, it's the elegant private parties instead. But when her father retired, there were elaborate financial considerations. So her oldest brother James was going to take over the parish, and
Hmm.
I think he was going to pay a bit of a pension to his father, the Reverend George. But they settled in Bath, and the first house they had there must have been a lovely year. And Jane had left us no writings from those years, those first couple of years. They were, I'm going to forget my Bath geography here, but they were just across Pulteney Bridge in the elegant new kind of semi-suburban Bath development. It was a 1 minute walk across the bridge. Was that Laura Place? I think it was Laura Place.
Lodgings in Laura
Number
Place.
four, number four, Laura Place, and just facing a beautiful public gardens. And there's now it's still a public gardens with a museum in the middle. And it was a lovely house. They had one or two floors of it. I forget. I think the upstairs floors. So it was a very handsome Georgian house. And if you just around the corner was still pretty well open countryside, so they could walk around the corner, buy fresh eggs and milk and so. So for someone who loved the countryside the way Jane did and complains like Anne Elliot of the white glare of Bath, and indeed it is, it it always strikes me as looking it to me like an Italian hill town, which I think it was meant to be. And if you're there on a hot summer day, you can understand the white glare. But they had a very lovely life, lots of diversions, concerts going on just across the road in the park, the social life, the theater, and her father's income was sufficient to pay for it all. When he died, they had to move.
Hmm.
And they moved successively from one smaller, dingier lodging to another. And they were living kind of like Mrs. and Miss Bates by the time they left Bath to share a house with her brother Frank,
Hmm.
the son of the Sailor brothers, in Southampton. And again, they could be back in an area where they think they were near the cathedral. It was green. They had a bit of a garden, and they were sharing it with Frank's pregnant wife. So those last years in Bath must have been very grim, very grim indeed, because being a single woman without money in a resort town where people came to find husbands and wives. Mm.
But we did get, I mean, we did get good fiction out of Jane after that, though.
Yes.
Unfortunately, that's the kicker. Unfortunately, is that Jane was now no longer on her preferment, enjoying her pleasures, and instead she started writing things. And so we got
Mhm.
Eleanor and Marianne, which obviously became Sensibility, and before she started writing that one, I think before Northern Garabi.
Yeah, yeah,
And then obviously First Impressions was the autumn
yeah,
of 1796, which is where obviously became Pride and Prejudice. So she wrote all three of those around the same
yeah,
time. But I don't
yeah.
think people realize that Jane didn't actually get published because even though the publishers bought Northanger Abbey, they never published it in her lifetime. And
Oh,
she was really only published in 1811 when she was 35 already.
yeah, 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 yeah. But well, the move to Chawton helped. Very happy when the household of three women, the two Austen sisters, their mother, and their closest friend from childhood, Martha Lloyd,
Hmm.
who years later after Jane's death became the second wife of one of her brothers, but was like the two Austen girls, a spinster without much income. So they their brother Edward, the one who had been adopted by rich relatives and was a great landowner with several estates and a whole lot of children. His wife in the early 1800s, his wife died, I think it was giving birth to her 12th or 13th child. And I kind of lost count there. And suddenly realized it might be useful to have mom and the two sisters nearby. So he offered them, he hadn't done this before as they were living in miserable, cold, dark, stuffy lodgings in Bath. He offered them a choice of houses either in his main Kent estate
Hmm.
or the estate in Chawton. And they wisely chose Chawton. I think they didn't want to be just down the road from Edward to be called upon every time he needed some help with the family. So they were very happy there and had house, garden, a community. Jane would walk every morning into Alton. It's still about a mile's walk. It's a nice walk, although there's more traffic now. Chawton used to be their cottage used to be right on the main road to Portsmouth. Now it's a dead end. It ends just
Oh.
past the cottage in front of the Chawton House, her brother's estate. But it was a comfortable home, and she in preparing for the move, must have been going through her collection of manuscripts that she had kept and beginning to pre prepare once again for publication. And it took a few more years, but by 1811, she did get Sense and Sensibility in print and followed quickly by the revision of Pride and Prejudice. But she never forgot the earlier work. She was always working on Sanditon, updating it, and she certainly worked on Northanger Abbey. She had to buy back the copy of
Henry had to do that for her.
Henry had to do it for her,
Yeah.
but she did it. She got it back, and Henry was able to get it published with Persuasion. The book she was writing as she was dying, it's shorter than the others, and she could hardly hold the pen any longer.
She
But
got
she,
through 11 and a bit chapters of Sanditon or the Brothers, as she
yeah,
later
yeah,
called it.
yeah.
And then she became too ill to write and had to go to hospital.
And there it was, she was writing that book satirizing hypochondria while she was too weak to hold a pen. She had to write with a pencil. And she died in that house that they had gone to see a doctor in Winchester and took a little house right by the cathedral. And they were in the upstairs rooms, again, like the Bateses in two or three rooms. And she was at least getting medical care, but she died there. And still laughing at people imagining themselves sick as she was dying. It's just extraordinary to me.
So she only got through because I think it was originally published as a fragment of a novel when Sanditon was first published. So do we know who came up with Sanditon and why?
I'm not, I can't re I must have known some of it. I forgot who changed the name from the brothers to Sanditon. But it was originally, bits of it came out in the various autobiographical essays that her nieces and nephews wrote in later years. And then one of the nieces, I think it was Caroline Austen, wrote a continuation of it. And I think one of the nephews also attempted a continuation. And so there are various possibilities as to where it might be going. I find it a fascinating read, and it relates so well to some of the themes in Northanger Abbey. So to me, it's like bookending her experience, and even to the last of her juvenilia, which was her first attempt uh, at serious fiction. Um, why am I blanking the name? She, Catherine or the Bower.
That's it.
Catherine with an A, not Catherine with an E. Um, the themes, and I in my book, I keep alluding to them because I go back and forth in time to those three works. And so did Jane Austen. Her mind was, I think, always flipping around between her earlier books and her later books because she kept going back and talking about the characters and revising the earlier manuscripts.
So in this book, with reading with Jane Austen, obviously you talk a little bit about what Jane has read as well. But when you had to reread everything, did you find something new that you
Oh,
thought?
always. Yeah, every time. I mean, I think that's well, my last sentence is this is the gift that Jane Austen gives us. Every time we reread, we find something new. Our emotions are activated in a different way. There's always something to be discovered. She wrote to be read. She wrote to be read by people who would read as carefully as she did, and she wrote to be reread. So, yes, absolutely. It's
So
always different.
it's interesting. It is always different. That's why
Yeah.
whenever I agree with you. I think Hollywood in general does Jane a great disservice when they just sort of paint her as a romanticist because if you obviously there are books that we could say are more romantic, but really they're character pieces and comments on society and things that were going on uh, during her time. that are
Yeah.
still prevalent today. And even when you read her letters, it's very interesting how her favorite niece Fanny, not anything to do with Fanny from Mansfield Park, her favorite niece Fanny, who may or may not have been Emma, she looks upon Fanny and she goes through, if you read her letters, she goes through a whole romance with her because Fanny wants to marry Mr. Plumtree, who is uh, well, practicing to be a priest, but he's not doing very well. And he has to wait 2 years for a living. And Jane even says to her in the letters, Fanny wants to marry him, but she's kind of not willing to wait. And Jane knows exactly what she's going to do. She's going to find a rich man with an estate and good family. Because, as we said before, even though Edward, Jane's brother, was given away to the knights, and he had a very good living given to him. His estate had, there were challenges to his estate. His estate had tons of legal problems. And then when their brother's bank went down, when Henry's bank died, he lost a lot of his property, a lot of it. And so Fanny, when she saw her dad going through all these legal problems, Fanny did what Jane thought she was gonna do and just married a rich man who had lots of kids. Like he already had, but he was an older man, but he was a rich man. And she thinks she married him a couple of days after Jane died, I think. And but Jane was right, and it's so annoying that she was right. Because here was Mr. Plumtree, a very nice man, and Fanny had other ideas, but there was nothing wrong with
He
him.
was a bit evangelical as well.
Yes, he was not interested in dancing after on the Lord's Day. And so even though he was very nice and she really liked him, Fanny's principles and her ideas about having to live with money were not up to snuff with his. And so even though Fanny was a nice girl, Mr. Plumtree just, and it's assumed that he did come from a good family, but he was the second son. And so you could see how all those things that Jane was talking about really did happen in her life because it happened to her niece, who was an otherwise very well-educated, nice girl, but her family was falling apart around her. Her dad's estate was falling apart, and she
Well,
needed
that's
to do
I
something.
wasn't that. I mean, they were. He was still living as a wealthy gentleman,
Oh
but
yes. Oh yeah. But he lost a lot, and I think it's when Henry's bank collapsed that things really. 'Cause I think he guaranteed his brother's bank up to, I think it was £20,000, which was a lot of money in those days. And he lost essentially a giant investment. So it was interesting how later on in life, Fanny decided maybe not to go with love and went with practicality. We don't really know about how what Fanny thought about the marriage, but Fanny was very young when she got married, and her new husband was not young, and he had many
had a big
children.
family.
Yeah. And so he essentially needed somebody as well. Same thing with Jane's friend Martha, who was already older on the older side of things, and
Yeah.
her marrying Jane's brother. And I mean, I don't think they had any children.
No,
So
well, it could have been past childbearing, but she had, because she was older than Jane, but they would have been friends from childhood. She might have had a secret crush on him all those years, and after his first wife died, she finally got him. We don't know.
I had imagined that that was something like persuasion
Yeah.
because I think they were constantly in contact with each other, and her brother was single for a very long time. So who knows? Who knows? It's
Yeah.
possible. But Jane always looked, she was very perceptive and she looked around to see what people would do and really how society and money, even on her rank of society, really
Yeah.
played upon things.
Yeah.
So in the book, your closing remarks are very interesting. And like you say, that Jane teaches us something new every single time. If you were telling young you who didn't like Pride and Prejudice that you would have written a book and done your PhD about Jane, what do you think young you would have said?
I would have been quite surprised. It wasn't the career path I was envisioning. But you, reading, one of the reasons I love literature and reading is that we are always performing the words differently, in our minds when we read. So every rereading is a new experience. I certainly know that with Wuthering Heights, which I first read when I was 11 years old.
I can't believe you read Wuthering Heights when you
Oh,
were
I mean,
11.
I read it, my mom, and I memorized passages. I was so impressed, and I thought it was this wonderful tragic love story. Well, of course, that's not. I've reread it every decade of my life. I taught it for a few years, and I would not. Uh, every decade of my life, I've reread it, and it's been a completely different book. And the Catherine Heathcliff stuff that I was all, my 11-year-old little romantic self was all crazy about memorizing Catherine's speech. I am Heathcliff. He is always, always in my mind. Um, I just see them as kind of horrors now,
Yes.
and Emily quite rightly kills them off and lets the new generation come up with something more mature. So yeah, it's a new book every time I read it because I'm a different person, and that's how reading works. That's why I love reading even more. Love to see movies, but reading the movies are always going to be the images and the words that the camera froze in time, whereas it's a new book every time we read it. When I was about, I guess I was 27, and I was at the very first proto Jane Austen conference that the wonderful Juliet McMaster, emeritus professor at the University of Alberta, she was also, I was very fortunate, external examiner on my dissertation. She had organized a conference, a bicentenary conference for Jane Austen in 1975 in Alberta at the University of Alberta in Edmonton. And I went as a graduate student. It was thrilling. There were a lot of the then major scholars, and it was a fantastic experience. And I remember talking um, to oh, I'm doing one of those senior things now. Just when I want to pull a proper noun out of the air, it decides to go and hide because it was in my head. If you, Barbara, no, it'll come to me anyway. Um, uh, she was a Jane Austen scholar from London, and I had just the previous summer taken a train trip to Newfoundland, which isn't as easy as it sounds.
Mm-mm.
Had an upper berth going all the way to Cape Breton. And there I was for 2 days on the train, rereading Persuasion, which I had read in my early 20s when I went through all of Jane Austen, and the tears streaming down my cheeks. And I said to her, now I'm Anne Elliot's age, and reading Persuasion was a different experience. It was deeply emotional. There I was, also an unmarried woman of 27, reading Persuasion, crying. She said to me, "You're you're not Jane Austen's age. 27 was much older then than it is today." And I thought, oh, she's right. Um, so many factors play in our reading experience. There's always something new.
The reading with Jane Austen. Elaine, thank you so much for being here. I could sit here and talk to you all day about this because you and I are both Jane nerds, and so
Well, thank you for the pleasure of being able to talk to another aficionado.
and so, if as well, if you are interested in not only the book, which we will have links to down below, but please join the Jane Austen Society of North America because it's so much fun, and we all dress up and have tea parties, and we all have. I was recently at one of them at Elaine's house, and we were trying to matchmake characters across books, and I thought that was so much fun. So please, please join the Jane Austen Society of North America if this is something that's interesting to you. It's very affordable, and the meetings are just really lovely, and you get to delve into Jane with with other people who enjoy the material as much as you do. But reading with Jane Austen, Elaine, congratulations on the book. I'm so proud of you. I am, and I would be proud of little you who decided that you didn't like Pride and Prejudice, and here you are writing a book about Jane anyway. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.